There was a time when the human search for meaning moved within deep and ancient channels. In the West, the Judeo-Christian tradition formed a living river, carrying stories, moral codes, sacred images that shaped the inner life of a people for centuries. These traditions were not perfect. They bore the marks of human frailty, institutional corruption, and historical tragedy. But they offered a coherent map of reality, a way to understand the self, the world, and the divine in a single integrated vision. They grounded morality in something higher than preference, and they provided discipline, guidance, and guardrails that could protect a seeker from deception. They understood that the longing for God is both holy and dangerous, that it can lead to sanctity or to ruin. In an age of unprecedented connectivity and technological advancement, much of that shared spiritual language has disappeared. The great traditions that once provided a framework for life, rituals, community, and an understanding of the cosmos have lost their hold. The decline of institutions like the Judeo-Christian Church, which once offered a clear moral and spiritual compass for Western civilization, has left a profound void, not only in our public squares, but in the private lives of millions. These ancient teachings, with their rich symbolism and communal rituals, offered more than doctrine. They offered belonging and a story in which to live. Without them, we face a deep hunger, and it is here that the modern-day charlatan finds fertile ground.
The paradox is striking. Intelligent, educated, and often successful people, the very individuals who should possess the critical thinking skills to protect themselves, turn their will over to leaders who, on closer inspection, are little more than malignant narcissists and sexual predators. This is not simply a failure of intellect. It is the story of the modern seeker, bereft of the traditional guideposts toward authentic spiritual insight, shaped by a cultural landscape defined by secular materialism, consumerism, and moral relativism. Taught to reject religion as outdated, yet unable to extinguish their deep need for meaning, they find themselves rootless. In this state, the mind becomes desperate for certainty and a comprehensive answer to life's most complex questions. They seek an authentic self without an inherited script, a task that can feel unbearably heavy. This desperation is the vulnerability the cult leader exploits with a surgical precision. The leader presents not only a doctrine, but themselves as the embodiment of the solution. The seduction often begins with love bombing, a flood of attention and validation that makes the seeker feel seen as never before. The leader mirrors their desires and fears, creating the illusion of a destined connection. That bond is the anchor. Critical thinking does not vanish overnight. It is bypassed by the emotional need for an all-encompassing truth. Esoteric teachings and the promise of secret knowledge act as powerful lures, making the seeker feel special, chosen. Over time, their intuitive discernment, once a natural part of their psyche, begins to atrophy. Consider the fellowship of friends. It drew artists, professionals, academics, not the gullible, but those yearning for a deeper reality. They were promised esoteric wisdom, a fourth-way path of self-improvement, and the charismatic magnetism of founder Robert Earl Burton. Burton presented himself as an instrument of higher beings, offering a path to consciousness and immortality. The group's Northern California estate was marketed as the land of the gods. But beneath the high culture and refined rituals lay a darker reality. Hard labor disguised as the work, sexual exploitation justified as spiritual transmission, and an ever-tightening web of psychological dependence. Identities were dismantled and rebuilt around the cult. Burton's lack of basic goodness and compassion was rationalized away as the necessary severity of a true teacher, or as a misunderstood facet of his supposed genius. How could people in the information age fail to see through such a figure? The answer lies in the slow, deliberate process of indoctrination. After love bombing comes the creation of an us versus them world. The group becomes the seeker's new family. Loyalty to the teacher is framed as the highest spiritual act. Outside doubts from friends, family, journalists are reframed as spiritual attacks, misunderstandings, or proof of the outsider's inferiority. In time, the seeker's social universe shrinks until only the cult remains. The initial thirst for meaning hardens into fearful dependence. Once vibrant individuals become reflections of their leader's grandiose desires. Psychology teaches that humans are most vulnerable when three needs converge: belonging, purpose, and certainty. In our fragmented culture, all three often go unmet, without a living tradition to provide true belonging, without a tested worldview to give purpose, without a moral anchor for certainty. The seeker stands exposed. Emotional intensity is mistaken for depth, exclusivity for truth, submission for humility, and the cult leader, master of symbols and stolen wisdom, turns that hunger into the means of control. The tragedy is that many seekers begin with pure motives. They want to live in truth, to serve something higher than themselves. But in a spiritual marketplace where the sacred has been commercialized, the counterfeit can pass for the real. The story of modern cults is not only about corrupt leaders, it is also about the vacuum that allows them to flourish. Secular materialism strips the cosmos of meaning. Consumerism teaches us to treat even spirituality as a product. Moral relativism dissolves the very idea of objective good and evil, and the rejection of religion, however understandable, has left many without the tools to discern true from false in matters of the spirit. It is not enough to expose the wolves after they have fed. We must address the deeper wound, the absence of authentic living wisdom in our culture. This means recovering and renewing the true spiritual traditions, not as rigid dogmas, but as living streams of guidance that can equip seekers to recognize the shepherd's voice over the voice of the thief. Until that renewal comes, the cycle will continue. The charismatic will rise, the vulnerable will follow, and behind beauty and inspiration, the machinery of exploitation will grind on. Yet this is not the end of the story. Even in this desert, the springs of truth still flow. They are sometimes hidden, neglected, or overgrown, but they are there. The teachings of the authentic mystics, the luminous saints of ancient Christianity, the contemplatives of the East, the sages of many lands, still carry living water. The modern seeker, even after betrayal, can find them. This rediscovery is not about blind obedience or lifeless ritual. It is about encountering the living current beneath all true religion. The purification of the heart, the watchfulness of mind, the death of vanity, and the birth of love. The The desert fathers and mothers, the treasures of the Philokalia, the radiant simplicity of St. Isaac the Syrian, the fiery compassion of St. Seraphim of Sarov, these voices speak with a clarity undimmed by the centuries. They do not seduce with charisma. They invite the steady work of transformation. Their path demands truth before God and the courage to face one's illusions, but it frees the soul into a love not bound by self-interest. This higher unconditional love manipulates no one, enslaves no one, divides no one into chosen and lost. It sees the image of God in every person and every moment as an opportunity to be a channel of blessing. The mystics tell us that to love in this way is already to commune with the higher realms, for such love is divine energy flowing through the awakened heart.
For those who have known deception, this path offers both healing and purpose. Betrayal becomes the fire that sharpens discernment. Loneliness becomes the doorway to deeper fellowship, not with a controlling leader, but with the communion of saints who have walked this path in every age. From here the seeker lives not as a consumer of spiritual highs, but as a bearer of presence. They learn to pray with the mind and the heart, to keep inner attention towards the source, to rest in the stillness where truth speaks, the stillness no charlatan can counterfeit. In this way, the seeker becomes more than a survivor. They become a servant of the light, a living channel through which the grace of higher worlds touches this one in a conversation, a home, a workplace, or a simple act of kindness that alters another's path. This is not romantic fantasy. It is the quiet, steady work of genuine transformation. The hope for our time is that such seekers will rise, men and women who have passed through the fire and emerged with clear eyes, deep hearts, and wills that will not bow to the counterfeit. Their lives will stand as proof that the great traditions were not in vain, that their truths can be renewed, and that even in an age of wolves, the true shepherd's voice can still be heard. For while the world is full of those who exploit the hunger of the soul, it is also full of the possibility that this hunger, rightly guided, will lead to the very source of life. That is the promise and the responsibility of the modern seeker, to walk with discernment, drink deeply from the wells of the mystics, and live as a blessing in a thirsty world.